It didn't announce itself, that change. It didn't arrive loudly or violently. It didn't tear through my life. Like a storm ripping roofs from houses, it arrived quietly, disguised as nothing, hidden inside something so small. I almost laughed at myself for noticing it at all. A pause, a look held a second too long, a feeling I didn't have a name for yet. And maybe that's the scariest part of how everything began, because no one ever warns you that the most dangerous moments in life, feel dangerous when they happen. They feel ordinary. They feel like Tuesday afternoons and half-cold coffee and quiet houses where love once lived but slowly moved out without leaving a forwarding address. And that was my life before everything shifted. I was Clara, 34 years old, married for 8 years to a man named David. A good man by all visible standards, responsible, reliable, respected, the kind of man people trust with keys and secrets, and serious conversations, the kind of husband people assume must make his wife feel safe. And maybe he did once. Maybe safety just slowly turned into silence somewhere along the way, because our marriage didn't explode. It faded. It softened until it became something you barely noticed anymore. Like wallpaper you stopped seeing, even though it surrounded you every day. Our mornings were efficient, our evenings functional, conversations reduced to logistics and reminders. Dinners eaten with the television speaking for us. Our bed shared by two bodies that no longer reached for each other. And I told myself this was normal. This was adulthood. This was marriage after the excitement settles. But I told myself wanting more was selfish, childish even. But loneliness doesn't argue with logic. It settles into your bones quietly. It shows up when the house is asleep and you reawake staring at the ceiling, wondering when the last time was that someone asked how you were and actually waited for the answer. And I didn't even realize how invisible I'd become until someone finally looked at me, really looked. Not as a wife or a mother or a responsibility, but as a person. And his name was Maxwell, the contractor David hired to fix our porch. A simple decision that would later feel like fate mocking me. Maxwell was younger, confident without being loud, kind without trying, the kind of man who listened with his whole face, who made eye contact like it mattered. And the first time he spoke to me, it wasn't flirtatious or bold. It was respectful, warm, ordinary. But ordinary felt extraordinary to someone who hadn't been truly seen in years. And I remember thinking how ridiculous it was that my chest tightened just because someone asked my opinion and waited while I answered, how embarrassing it felt to enjoy being noticed, how I told myself again and again that it meant nothing. That I was tired, lonely, imagining things, but loneliness sharpens your senses. It makes small moments feel big, and when my fingers brushed his hand while handing him a glass of water that afternoon, it wasn't desire that startled me, it was recognition. Like something long asleep inside me stirred and whispered that it was still alive, and I hated myself for that whisper. I lay awake that night beside David, listening to his breathing and wondering how two people could share a life and still feel like strangers, wondering how long you could go without being touched emotionally before your heart started looking elsewhere. For proof. it still existed. And days passed, normal on the surface, chaotic underneath. Because once you notice the emptiness, you can't unsee it. And then came the storm, the power outage. The quiet afternoon where rain trapped Maxwell inside the house while David was away. And there we were, sitting across from each other in the dim light, talking about things no one had asked me about in years. Who I was before motherhood, what I loved before responsibility, what dreams I buried without realizing I'd buried myself along with them. And when he told me I deserved to be heard, I laughed it off, but my throat tightened because truth has weight and I wasn't prepared to carry it. And nothing happened that day that anyone could point to and call betrayal, no lines crossed that the world would recognize. Just glances that lingered, silences that spoke, a moment where his hand brushed mine again and the air changed, thickened, charged, and I pulled away. Because I knew then that this wasn't harmless, that this wasn't just attention, it was temptation wearing kindness as a mask. And when the lights came back on, it felt like waking from a dream you didn't want to explain to yourself. But once something is awakened, it doesn't go back to sleep just because you tell it to. And after that, I tried to be careful. I tried to distance myself. I told myself this was nothing, just a reaction to years of neglect, just my mind filling gaps that shouldn't exist. But every time David looked past me instead of at me, every time my anniversary passed unnoticed, every time silence replaced connection, Maxwell's words echoed louder in my head, and when he returned to finish the work, the pull between us felt undeniable, not sexual, not reckless, just heavy with everything unsaid to people standing too close to a line, pretending they didn't know exactly where it was. And when he admitted he thought about me more than he should, the honesty in his voice scared me more than any lie could have, because it meant I wasn't alone in this. And that realization was both comforting and terrifying. And when that fragile moment happened, that brief, trembling kiss that carried more loneliness than passion, I knew immediately that something irreversible had occurred, not because of the act itself, but because of what it confirmed, that my heart had already stepped away from the life I was living, and the guilt that followed was suffocating, not loud, not dramatic, just constant, woven into every routine, every smile I forced, every night I lay beside a man who didn't know I was quietly falling apart. Maxwell disappeared when the work ended, and part of me was relieved, part of me mourned like I'd lost something I was never allowed to claim, and life continued because life always does. But I was changed, carrying a secret that weighed more than the ring on my finger, a secret not of passion but of truth, that love doesn't always end with betrayal. Sometimes it ends with neglect. Sometimes it erodes until something new feels like oxygen. And the hardest part wasn't missing Maxwell. It was realizing how far I'd drifted from myself, how easy it was to betray your own needs while convincing yourself you were being loyal. And now I live inside that question every every day, whether infidelity begins with touch or with the moment you stop feeling at home in your own life, whether guilt is louder than loneliness or just quieter and longer lasting, and I don't have answers. I only have this story, this truth I'm still learning how to carry, because some mistakes don't destroy your life. They simply force you to finally look at it, and once you see the cracks, pretending they aren't there becomes the hardest betrayal of all.